Before I start talking, I just want to pop in quickly and say that because there has never been another veterinary education in the country, the news channels has been all over this place. And guys, Charlie made it to television, so we have officially peaked. She even pooped on television. I am so proud of her. That was all. Bye.
This video has been sitting in my scripts folders for so long that I have had to change the title 4 times. From first day of vet school, then first week of vet school, all of a sudden it's the first month of vet school, and now I am finally ready to talk about it after my first semester at a brand new vet school. For those that don't know, a semester is almost half a year. It's been so incredibly interesting for more than one reason to start over, and I really just wanted to come and tell about how this school differentiates from the one in Copenhagen in terms of teaching methods and what we actually learn and what they want us to focus on during our years in the veterinary school, again compared to the one in Copenhagen. And just also pop in and say, guys, how I'm doing, how it's been starting over the first years. Don't know if you're interested in that, but some of you might ask if I'm socially capable of making friends. So we're gonna answer some of those questions and just overall look at how this first semester has been. I'm not gonna get too much into why I stopped in Copenhagen because I could easily talk about it for 10 minutes, and I have already made a video explaining the whole situation. But in short, studying in the big cities is quite expensive. Who would have thought? So moving back here meant that I could move in with my boyfriend, I could get closer to family and just overall get back to familiar surroundings. So for me, it was just the perfect plan to switch to this brand new school that opened. I haven't updated you in a while, so I'm gonna start out with the social aspect, because it's rare that new students or people that attend new places aren't thinking about making good social connections, making friends, maybe even establish a really good studying group. So I think it's pretty normal that a lot of schools will have tutors or older students come in and like start social activities the first couple of days. So we didn't have any lectures the first 3 or 4 days, I think. We would just attend the school, and then there would be these older students that would just help us make games and like make friends and show us around and talk a little bit about the life at university and all these things. The funny thing was though that because this was a brand new school, there weren't any older students. So we got people in that studied biology and agrobiology, or maybe the 2nd or 3rd year. So not really older veterinary students, but just subjects that could relate to the veterinary subject. And they were super sweet, but it was so weird not being able to ask questions like, how's this teacher or that teacher, or what's our exam gonna be like, or even where's the toilet, because not only don't they attend the education, they don't even attend the same building or school, so they came from all over the place. And that also meant we wouldn't be in daily contact with them. So they were so good at arranging games and making sure we got to know each other. It's not that at all, but it's just weird from what I'm used to from other like education places where you maybe see them in the hallway and you greet them and whatnot, but nope, not here. You might recall, if you have watched some of my other veterinary content from Copenhagen, that I did deal a lot with imposter syndrome when I started out. And this was due to that a lot of people in Copenhagen, when they started attending, they had veterinary parents, they had worked at a vet office for 5 years, and now they could finally attend with all the knowledge that they had gotten from over the years, while I just liked animals. The funny thing is that now it's kind of flipped, because we don't have tutors that have attended a veterinary education. So I became the one that was the older student that had attended in Copenhagen and could maybe give people an idea about how the exam could be, or maybe give an idea about how I would think the education structure would be. which was so weird, but it has meant, thankfully, that my imposter syndrome has not at all been as prominent this year as it was in Copenhagen, because I'm suddenly the source of knowledge for a lot of these people that were just like me. They just like animals. There aren't a lot of people in my class that actually have veterinary experience. It's just a lot of people that like animals, or maybe come from a farm, a cow farm and a pig farm. I know we have someone from. So it's really interesting and really freeing for me to just be able to focus on what we're learning instead of having this imposter syndrome in the back. On the flip side, I am kind of nervous that I am going to give anyone imposter syndrome by having attended the education before and now having some knowledge that I can use. But I try to just only mention Copenhagen if someone asks or wants to know about it. But it's still something that I think about a little bit. I don't want anyone to feel bad. And the reason I know that not a lot of people have veterinary experience is because I am finally down to a class size where I can confidently say everyone's names and I actually know everyone in my class. I think we started out 32 or 32 people got accepted. Some never showed up, which don't do that. But we started out 32. I think we're down to 27, maybe 6 now. And this is gonna sound so introverted, but I really feel more motivated to actually get to know people when I know that I'm gonna see them on a daily basis and work with them, compared to if they're just someone out of 190 people that I might not even get along with. Or yeah, I don't really want to use social energy on that compared to when I know that these people I'm gonna see and I'm gonna talk to them and we're gonna hang out. Is that bad? It may sound boring, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how the school's structures differently, which also sounds unimportant, but trust me, it's what determines how much time I have on my hands when I study, so it's important. So a lot of people might know semester structure, and that's what this new school is going under. But in Copenhagen, they live by something called block structure, which is 4 exam periods every year with a week or 2 to catch up on the things you are lacking behind in or to practice for the exam. Now, in semester structure, it's 2 exam periods every year with a month and sometimes more without lectures to catch up on the things you're lacking behind or want to practice for the exam. I think a lot of universities go by the semester structure where half a year will be 1 semester. And then in Copenhagen, and I know some universities will also go by other structures, but the block structure in Copenhagen is then a quarter of a year that's 1 block. Now, I'm sure that there are good and bad things about both, but I really enjoy knowing that if I lag behind on anything or just need time to practice, then I have the time with a month. Whereas if I was behind on something in Copenhagen, it's just bad luck because I only have a week to maybe get to practice for 3 exams. Whereas here it's the same amount of exams, but it's just bigger subjects, if that makes sense. So obviously spanning half a year compared to a quarter of a year, the subjects are longer, but it's not more subjects often. And then it might be easy to think, well, then the exams in Copenhagen must be easier because there's not as much to remember. Well, for the veterinary education, the one in Copenhagen is without anything to help you. I'm not sure if there's a word for it, but you can't bring notes, you can't use the internet, you can't even bring your books, nothing. You have to remember everything when you go to the exam. And you have not that much time to remember everything and practice. On semester structure and on the new veterinary education with semester structure, we get to bring notes, we get to bring books, we get to use the internet on top of a longer period to practice. So while the subject is longer, I still feel like it's much less stressful because at least I have the things to help me at an exam. Block structure overall just feels like it has a much faster tempo, whereas you just come out of your exam and there's 3 months after you're gonna go to the next one, and then it's just exam all the time. As you can probably tell, I like semester structure the most, but if you attend the University of Copenhagen or any other university that has different structures and you just love it, that's totally fine. Okay, what am I actually learning then? So I'm currently at the end of my first semester where we have had 3 subjects. So let's start with the one called the cell. Yes, it is just biochemistry with another name. I feel like I always hear biochemistry being this feared subject by new students that are attending the veterinary education. And if you're bad at biology or chemistry, don't let that stop you from attending because they're so good at introducing us to it and making it so that people that haven't had it in their hands for a long time can still pick it up and understand what's going on. Plus, I personally am so bad at these subjects, but I'm still pulling through. Hopefully, I haven't got my exams answers yet, so Charlie! What's up? Okay, wait. I can get you in here. Wow, Charlie, so sweet of you to join. Voluntarily. What does biochemistry really entail? It's cells. It's a lot about the different organelles in the cells, DNA, RNA structures, all the chemical bindings in in all of the different chemical. You see, I'm bad at this. I'm so nervous for my exam results. All about the different types of cell divisions and the phases and the cell life cycle, extracellular matrix, a lot of these things. Of course, also chemistry parts, so that could be naming molecules via the IUPAC method, all these sort of things. It's biochemistry, I don't know what to tell you. If I should name a difference in what we're taught here compared to in Copenhagen, here we focus a lot on prokaryotes, so bacteria and how bacteria looks through the microscope, how bacteria's cell walls work, because their argument was that they really want to teach us how bacteria works and operates, because we're going to look at a lot of diseases that obviously involves bacteria. So they thought knowing a bit about prokaryotes would make sense. So we also have a lot of lab work actually compared to in Copenhagen. I think we're in the lab every other to every week for a period of time. So that's probably the biggest difference I can think of. And yeah, while lab work obviously makes it more interesting, it's just still not my favorite. Our second subject was called Animals and Tissue, and if you've seen my veterinary subject rundown from Copenhagen, it's sort of a combination of zoology, histology, and a little bit of anatomy. The little anatomy part in Animals and Tissue is actually what I love the most about this change compared to Copenhagen, because in Copenhagen, when you start out with the anatomy course, you haven't really had any precursors to that. So when you get anatomy, that's your first introduction to what's cranial and caudal and all of these weird Latin names. Whereas here, it's not an anatomy course. That's actually what I'm starting after this semester. But still, we have been through all the bones, and we had half a year to get through all the bones. So whereas in Copenhagen, it was maybe 1 or 2 weeks to get to know every bone in the dog and the cat and the horse and the cow. Here we have 2 to 3 weeks to just have scapula, and then the next 2 to 3 weeks is the front leg, and then the next 2 to 3 weeks is the hindquarters. So it's just a lot more time to actually get to know these structures, to know the different ways and what they're called in anatomy and all of that. And then we start our anatomy course after this semester, where we can then go on with muscles and all of the other things, which I think is such a good change, because people actually have the time to get into a whole new language, which is Latin, and also get to know how to work with these bones and how to handle different animals and whatnot. But I'll get into the handling of animals a bit later, but we did use that a lot in anatomy as well. So yeah, I love this change. The other parts of the subject, so zoology and histology. Now, histology is very much like in Copenhagen. We learn about a specific tissue and the cells in that tissue, then we go down to the lab and we look at it through a microscope to confirm if it corresponds with what we've learned in class. That's very much the same as what they did in Copenhagen. Histology overall also involves a lot of Latin names. It could be Latin names of some of the structures in the tissue. It could also just be Latin names of the different layers in, for example, the skin. So my personal favorite is stratum spilosum. Last part in this subject was zoology, and I loved it. Zoology, for those that don't know, is basically where we learn about animals that we don't see every day. So not horses and dogs and cats, but reptiles and birds and fish and all of these different animal kingdoms that we know. And in Copenhagen, I had a teacher that was not really motivated. Zoology was just a subject that needed to get over with, and we just needed something with animals so that people wouldn't stop attending the education or whatever. It was a bit dumb. Whereas here, my teacher is so motivated and sweet about what she's telling us, and she just just loves all of the different animal species, and she's a big bird lover. And get this is so cool. My zoology teacher is from England, and she has been taught in bird respiratory systems by the man who discovered it, which means that I am the grandchild when it comes to learning about the bird respiratory system, and it is so cool. So we of course learned about the bird respiratory system, but also the respiratory system of fish and how their blood circulation works in different animals, what their hearts look like. And while it's not as in-depth as obviously the whole education is going to go around with dogs and cats and all of that, it's still great to have an idea about what these different things are. It's also in this subject where we actually dissect our very first animals. So we dissected fish and chickens, I think. Now the chickens, this was actually also a cool fact, or it's not really cool, but it's interesting. So we dissected hens, and then there were, I think, 2 roosters. Now the roosters had a fine liver, but all of the other chickens, so all the hens, had fatty liver disease. And it was so weird to see in person how fatty liver disease looks. It was just where the roosters had like a fine liver, you could see all the lobes, you could see that it looked like liver. It was just a blob of disgusting, smelly substance at the hens. So I now know firsthand why you shouldn't feed an all-seed diet to your birds. Okay, the very last course, and this is a bit of a long title, but it's called Animals, Vets and Society. So I guess this subject mostly relates to ethics, but they have taken a completely different take on it, which I am once again so happy that they did. And I'm sorry, Copenhagen, but for me personally, ethics was kind of a boring subject because it was a lot of talking to get to the conclusion that hitting animals is kind of not okay. It's like, thanks, I wasn't planning on doing that. This subject can still have some element of that's a kind of obvious answer thing, but it is totally made up for by the amounts of exercises and trips and guests, veterinarians, but also just guests coming in and talking about animal training or animal behavior or something like that. And I think it's such a cool twist to the subject, and a really needed one. My favorite part is probably the addition of a lot of behavior and training, because I think it's so important for veterinarians to know how a stress response can affect the results that I'm taking when this animal is at my vet office, or what natural motivations an animal will have in terms of how we house them or the environment they're in, on top of just training. How do we train these behaviors so that they're more in our and the animal's favor? On top of cool people just telling us about things, we also have these trips that I quickly mentioned. And these trips were maybe to a horse facility to learn, get this, just how to handle a horse. And I love that. Or we had maybe the pig stables that we went to learn how to clicker train a pig. And I think that is so cool. And at the start I was a bit afraid that it was gonna be like, we're gonna take these animals in and we're just gonna do whatever with them so that you can learn what you need to know and not think too much about the animals. But they really do. I'm so glad, because for example, when we had our pig exercise, they were so sweet to be like, well, we're gonna drag in multiple pigs because we don't want any of the pigs to get separation anxiety because they're flock animals. So even though we only had to clicker train one of the pigs, we had 3 pigs running around in a pen so that it wouldn't get lonely. Overall, I love this subject. I love the twist that they've made. Just learning how to handle animals, I think is so essential, because in Copenhagen, again, they could maybe just throw out a horse term and we'll be like, well, some people don't know where the flank is on a horse. I have been around horses, but I know a lot of people haven't. So I think it's just cool that we get through all the animals, how we handle them, how they behave, what this and that means in animal language. I think it's really cool the way that they have sort of turned this subject into just a good opportunity to learn a lot about the animals. Did we have some ethical theories? We did. Was it just as boring? Yes, personally, I think so. But it did not at all, like, take up as much as the subject as I would have thought it would. So bottom line for me, you've probably guessed it, I'm so happy with the decision that I made moving schools, because I love the modern twist that they have gotten on this school compared to just doing what we've been doing the past 250 years. So of course we're allowed to bring our, not phone, but use the internet, because we're probably going to use the internet when we get into the field, or at least look in our notes. And just the focus on animal behavior, training, welfare, all of these things. And I also want to say that my teachers have been great. I mean, they haven't taught in this education probably ever. It's also brand new for them, but they have really handled it so great, and they are so accepting of criticism, also because it's new, so they of course want to do a great work. So us coming up and saying that we like this, we didn't like that, they're gonna change it for the next year of students, and I'm glad to be a part of that team that can help future students have an even better education. Charlie, what's up? You're screaming. It's always in the outros. It's always in the outros they do this. Ask any bird YouTuber, I swear to God. Yeah, I know. I need like 2 lines, Charlie. I gave Charlie a nut, so I'm on a timer here. But thank you so much for watching, and Happy New Year's. I didn't get to say that because I haven't posted a lot. I'm not one for New Year's resolutions, but I'm gonna try and post more, even though it's been hard for me to find, I don't know, the motivation or the time. I'm not sure what it is, but I really wanna try and actually make an effort to post more, because it's so fun to do YouTube, and I think it's so relaxing to sit and edit. It's mostly this filming part that I find hard, but hopefully it turned out okay. I also just want to say, it's not to talk badly about Copenhagen that I'm making this video, or University of Copenhagen. I had a great time. I learned a lot, obviously, that I've been able to take in with me to this new year at vet school, which is probably also a contributor to why I feel like it hasn't been as stressful as when I attended there. So Copenhagen is great. This new school is great, and I just really like the new perspectives and the way they're going around it, really.